hydrogenated fats. They're hydrogenated, or partially hydrogenated. They are trans fats. And what they do in the cell is they also drive oxygen out. Right? Our diets are just resplendent with these modified oils that the body just cannot digest. Right? And the second thing is, right, the sugar. Now, the body ideally contains about a spoonful of sugar in the bloodstream. If it gets up to a teaspoon and a half, the body dies. If it gets down to a half a teaspoon, the body dies. So the body has to work so hard, because we eat average of 65 teaspoonfuls of sugar a day. Now that's carbohydrates, anything that the body, right, will convert, right, converts to sugar. Right? And then with all this sugar, the body's got to find something to do with it to keep us from eating ourselves to death. And what does it do? It uses insulin. Insulin's a storage factor. And insulin, of course, stores all this sugar as fat. That's when we get fat. Right? But it's all an indication of not enough oxygen. Now, what we have been experiencing, right, is people doing chemotherapy, right, and you know what the figures are. The figures according to the Journal of Oncology, American Journal of Oncology. This is the Bible, right, for cancer doctors. Have admitted that the 5-year rate, survival rate, and that's what they term a cure if you last 5 years. And you know, in Australia, and the reason I bring up Australia this time is because this week they got an individual suing Merck over Vioxx, got a $260,000 or $70,000 judgment, right, in Australia. Vioxx was another one of those drugs that came from a drug company, killed 55,000 people. Okay, that's an aside. I'm sorry. Let's get back to the cancer. Okay, so chemotherapy then in the United States, all right, is successful 2.1% of the time. Now that's like taking your car when you're having problems with it to a mechanic that you know is going to not fix it 98% of the time. How many people are going to do that? You got it. It does, however, we have one of our members in Germany. He asked me, so what if they do the chemotherapy at the same time they're doing the cesium? Will the cesium interfere with the chemotherapy? I don't think so. Apparently it will not, but the other way it will. The chemotherapy will affect the cesium. Affect it so much that in all probability it will not be able to do its job, because chemotherapy is a poison that also creates cancer cells. You cannot put a fire out while you keep on pouring gasoline on it. So let's remember that part. Now, when you are approaching a doctor, preferably an ACAM doctor, or somebody that not only has a degree but also is a member of American College of Alternative Medicine, they know both sides of the aisle. They will be able to help you with this. Now, why does the cancer, among women, the foremost cause, the number one cause of cancer is in the breast. For men, it's in the prostate. Wow, these are two extremely fatty organs, right? And so that's the easiest place for these accumulations. However, you may be assured, right? Although some of us disagree on this. Cancer is cancer. Where it breaks out does not indicate that that is the only place it is existent. Right? It is my opinion that it is systemic. When you take one spoonful of trans fatty acids, let's say margarine, let's say anything that says hydrogenated on it, one spoonful is enough to put 100,000 molecules of these trans fats, which drive oxygen out, into every cell in the human body, and there are 100 trillion cells in the body. Now, you cannot persuade me, right, that fatty acids went only to the breast. We know that it metastasized as a result of going through the lungs and being spread throughout the body. Okay, so the key then, all right, to all of these things which we'll talk more about the formation of the hydrogen peroxide and the macrophages and the etc. All right, in just a few minutes. Okay, but that'll give you an idea. Now, once you understand what happens, and incidentally, the way they create cancer cells for use in research is they take a perfectly healthy cell, put it in a petri dish and withhold oxygen from it. Overnight, it will be cancerous 100% of the time the next morning. Vivid. It cannot be healed. It cannot be cured. Cured is the word you cannot use with cancer. It cannot be cured. You have to kill it. You have to seal it off so it will remain trapped. Okay? Or you have to surgically remove it. Now, any of these things, chemotherapy and radiation, they cause additional deoxygenation, which is more cells. Now, that in a nutshell. Right now, and then we'll go in just a few minutes into how the cesium protocol works. Okay. High blood pressure. Right now, there are four primary things. First of all, what happens with high blood pressure is that remember those trans fatty acids we were talking about just now? They cannot be digested. There's nothing in the human body that can digest them. Where do they go? They go directly to the artery walls. They go directly to the kidneys, to the little glomeruli in the kidneys, these little fingers there, and they plaque them over, and so they harden them, and then blood, right, can't get through there. And you come along with bad calcium. Bad calcium is something like processed dairy. You know what a great product raw butter is, or raw milk, and they cook it and destroy it. You know that a newborn calf has to have milk in order to survive. You give it pasteurized milk, and that calf will be dead in a month. And everything that we see is, let's eat the dairy. Feed the dairy. We got yogurt, but it's made from what? You got it. Pasteurized milk. All of these pasteurized things are cooked, and the benefits are destroyed. Okay, now, and then there might be some heavy metals in there. There might be something like lead or cadmium or mercury, because all the vaccinations, right, remember those things are foreign to the body. You have to do something to trick the body into accepting them. And so usually the manufacturers use either mercury, the same thing that's deadly in your teeth, or they'll use aluminum, the same thing that causes what of such notoriety, and that's Alzheimer's. Okay, so that these things can be they all stick in that plaque, right? But where does that thing begin? The whole thing begins with what the scientists call hypoascorbemia. Now that means you're just not getting enough ascorbate. Years ago they called it vitamin C before they found out it really wasn't a vitamin. It's a metabolite. It has so many functions. But when the body doesn't get it, when the cell walls, artery walls don't get enough of the ascorbate, then they get watery and they leak. Right? Pauling and Rath, right, named it subclinical scurvy. You know, from all the history lessons that when you were a kid, you had all the sailors were dying of scurvy. What was happening is they didn't have enough ascorbate, and their arteries were cracking, they getting watery and leaking, and they were drowning in their own blood, bleeding to death internally. All right, well, we do get a little bit more than they got. They found that limes would keep them from dying while they were on the ship. Didn't mean it would keep them healthy.